Okay, off we go again. So this is a complicated trail. I've shown in yellow sort of the artery, the main backbone of the Greenway Trail. But in order to get from West Side Road here on this backbone that will then take us all the way over here to Beacon Hill, we have to get over here to the Great Salt Pond. And so there's three sub trails, one from the Great Salt Pond through the Ball O'Brien Park up to the cemetery into the trail. Then there's this little loop known as the Harris Loop. And then at the end, you can either retrace your steps or you can go down Beacon Hill Road and come back and do a loop this way. So I'm going to show you aspects of all of this. It's a little complicated, and I'll try to make sure I alert you when I change my view, my path. But we'll start here at the entry to the Ball O'Brien Park. If you're familiar with the island, this is right before the Champlin's driveway, and that's our beautiful public restrooms and the skateboard park up there. But what we're going to do is go along to the side of the restroom, and you'll find there a path. You'll go down that path, and it'll just a short little distance between the Salt Pond settlement, and it weaves its way down towards the harbor. And as we almost got to the harbor the other day, I noticed that they have these giant common mullein plants. And these are the seed heads. And we're used to seeing them around the island, but these seemed especially tall. And I'll a little more about that in a little bit. But we go by this little sort of mini grouping of common mullein and end up down on the shoreline. So now we're in our proper starting place at the at Great Salt Pond at the shoreline. And I was looking out at the water, and in this photo, this is all underwater. This isn't the water stops here and this is bare ground. That's how clean and clear the water is right now. It looks like there's no water here, but there is. I promise you, it's about 4 or 5 inches of water right here at the bottom edge. It's so incredibly clear right now. And then if you turn around and we'll start our walk inland, you have the shoreline to go and then the pathway. And you'll see quite a bit of erosion on this day's trail, including this part of it. So you always have to watch your step. This isn't too steep or too rocky, so you can you can navigate it fairly easily. But you get up this little berm, and now we're back into that little grove of there's a 4 or 5, 6 of these big, tall, giant common mullein. This one was the tallest of them all. And I was trying to figure out how am I going to show how tall these are? Because usually they're about, at the height, maybe 4 feet, 5 feet. But this one was over my head. And it's a good 18 inches over my head, which makes this common mullein spike about 6.5 feet tall, which is incredible. So, but I left it standing, even though I was tempted to take it home as a souvenir. I thought maybe somebody else will wander down here and be impressed by the height of this. You just never know what you're going to find, even in the middle of winter. So proceeding back up the path, again, you got to watch your step. I wouldn't be going down today. This particular day, it was frozen solid, so it was quite easy to navigate. But when mud season sets in, you might as well just sit down and slide down because you're going to end up that way anyway. As you get up to the top of the hill, you see this little sign right here, and it says caution rough terrain. Of course, we've already passed that part, so the sign is, but really the reason I took this photo is because that little tiny American holly. And if you've been watching these recently, you know that I've become enthralled with discovering American holly on our travels. They're everywhere. And as I've said in the past, in the wintertime, especially when everything is brown and the leaves are off everything else, the common holly is really very obvious. And I think we're going to be lucky in the next 10, 20 couple of decades to see common American holly really establish itself as a shrub on Block Island. So they're everywhere. And this is the first of many that I'll be pointing out. So at this point, you can either go left into the park, or you can stay right and go along the pathway that is sort of the little walkway. And I've left in the view here in the background, you can see this is the Salt Pond Settlement Building. Throughout this walk, I found that although often I could feel like I was in the middle of nowhere, houses and evidence of human activity and economy was going on all the time. And I started thinking about this walk as a good metaphor about how we should be. And in terms of the land, nature, and human use and enjoyment, and hopefully not abuse. So I think may have said something like that in the title slide about the interaction between humans and the landscape, because you're going to see a lot of that throughout this walk. So we proceed on a little bit, and it's just a short bit. All of a sudden, I noticed that there were a lot of birds. So I looked around, and sure enough, at the back of one of these Salt Pond Settlement apartments, somebody has gone full on with the bird feeders, and it's great. And they've got hanging feeders and basket feeders, and over here out of view there was a Clorox bottle feeder, and there were birds everywhere, and among the American flag and the covered up barbecue and everything else, and the mourning doves up in the trees just waiting for me to pass so they could get back down to their feeders. So off I went. And coming back out towards the parking lot, now we came down this path. Now we're looking at the back of the restroom building, and we're just about to emerge back in the parking area. And you notice that tree right there. That is a black walnut, and it's really a beautiful tree. It's survived at least two utility wire trimmings, and still is quite majestic in spite of the fact of having many branches lobbed off of it because of utility wires. But it's got a couple of good branches headed in towards the park, so it's quite beautiful, and it's got walnuts on it. Every year I find dozens of them, and there's still these two on the ground. There were more than this, but on the ground there. So black walnut right there in the middle of the New Harbor Business Zone. And in the other corner, so the black walnut is over here. In this corner, diagonal across, is this another very majestic, I believe this is probably a maple, although I'm not sure. But I put this in here because here's the entry, so you know where to come, you have plenty of parking. But here's the little free library, and there's several of these around the island and many communities all over the country. And it's a great way of, we're talking a lot about taking nature to people, or where they are, and this is take your library to where people are. And it's a great little program. You leave a book and take a book, and there's everything from self-help to how to fix it, to kids books, to novels. And if you're not familiar with the little free libraries, look for them. I'm sure they're in every community, or will be soon. So off we go. We're going to first start by taking the entry into the trail from the cemetery. We have probably the most beautiful cemetery in the world. You go up the road, and it's just fantastic. Obviously, probably you could tell these were two photos taken on different days, sort of a somber gray day and a bright, glorious blue day. So up the hill. Once you get to the top of the hill, you take a right, take the first right, and you go down the hill, and you go down the road. And in this one, you're going down the road. And when you get to the far end, the road kind of turns around like this. And but the cemetery continues on, and there's a fairly wide path right there that takes you down into this back corner of the cemetery. And there are actually some gravestones back here in this little area. And there's three that I saw right away: Edwin and Clara Perry, Robert and Lupita Banks, and Robert Smith. Not the Robert Smith that most of us know. And then in the back corner is a step stile that will take you over the stone wall into the the Greenway Trail proper. And here it is a little bit closer, quite sturdy and get good handrails. Once you get over there, you can come down on this side. Now we're looking back into the cemetery this way. And we would be taking, you can have many choices at this point. And if I was entering the Greenway from the cemetery, I would then take a left and start down the path. For purposes of this, I'm going to like time travel myself back to West Side Road, where I'm going to get to the other entry to this Greenway Trail. And this is roughly across the street from the Champlain Coast Guard Road. This is what it looked like a few weeks ago. And this is what it kind of looks like now. So we have snow and non-snow pictures. It took me many trips to make this presentation. So we have all kinds of weather just in one short walk. But this Greenway is marked right here, the traditional Greenway marker. You just go up the road a little bit and turn, and the path starts right about here, which is right here. And some days it's snowy, and this is the very beginning. And some days it's not so snowy. And this really sort of starts the traditional ecosystem, the typical ecosystem that we're going to be talking about the rest of the time, not the Great Salt Pond or the cemetery. Those are very specialized ecosystems. And one thing right away, you notice this looks like a mess, a tangle. And if you're not on the path, if you're looking inward, it looks like a tangle, especially this year, lots of understory. But just in this one view is two things: the American holly, which is a native plant, and this grass is called Silva Grass, and it's an escape. I saw quite a bit of it scattered throughout this section of the trail. It's like the panic grass that I talk about in some of the grassland walks that I've led. The switchgrass, which is a native and produces wonderful seed heads. This is silver grass. This is an escape horticultural plant. And it's sometimes known as maiden grass. It's got a number of names. Miscanthus is its genus name. It's probably best to refer to it in that way, but it's something to look out for on the island. It's escaping people's yards, and it's got a windblown seed. Here it is. This time of year, there's hardly any seed left. A little bit over here, seed head left. It's pretty for what it is, because when I see this, I think it's not switchgrass, therefore I don't want it there. But it has a nice form to it, if you like that sort of thing. But we got to look out for this, because this could displace our switchgrass and our other native grasses. So try to contain them to your yards if possible. Lots of fungi, and I think it was about a year ago, maybe, I said on one of these talks, oh, I wish I could meet somebody who would teach me about ferns. And you know what? Somebody listening to this was an expert on ferns, and now I've worked with her a lot and learned a lot about ferns. Well, now I'm putting out into the universe that I need somebody to teach me about fungi, because there's so many. And this is I can get it to its broad group, which is a shelf or a bracket fungi. It grows, it's a polypore. It doesn't have gills like a regular, like a mushroom you think of that you eat. It's pore. It's a fungi that has pores like a puffball, only this is called a shelf or a bracket fungi. And it grows on sides of trees and wood, and comes out in this sort of shelf and they can be any color. They can be gray and white and yellow and brick colored. And as I like to say, sometimes it doesn't matter if you don't know exactly what name it is. If you're noticing how beautiful it is, and that it's there, and that it's breaking down substances and creating nutrients for the soil by breaking down material, then you're more than halfway there to the appreciation of it, even without knowing its name. And we see a lot of this, which is not fungi, but it looks like it. This is a lichen, and one of the main reasons you can tell the difference, a lichen is a symbiotic relationship organism that's made of two components, a fungi and a blue-green or green algae. And the green algae, blue-green algae, acts to make energy from the sun because it can photosynthesize. And so it provides energy to the organism, but the fungi part of it can break down the substrate that it's on and provide nutrients to the organism. So it's a symbiotic, useful relationship. And it too is beautiful. But if it's tinged green, it's most likely a lichen, not a fungi. Most likely, I say. So as I go along this walk, I come to a part where I have to choose, and this is the Harrison Loop. Now, if I were to go straight, I would go over this little rise and I would meet up where the step stile was from the cemetery. But for this little bit of a loop, we're going to go right, and we'll go this way. And right away, we see these oak trees. And on this particular loop, there's a lot of oak trees, and you can tell they're oak trees right now because they're the ones that are still holding on to their leaves. These brown, curly, that looks very frilly, sort of like a medieval ruff, if you will, around as a fashion statement. But here it is oak leaves, and with their very distinctive shape and form and beautiful color. I don't know, there's something very happy about having those still up there in the branches. We come along, the pathway kind of is a loop, so it's constantly bearing, in this case, bearing left. I guess if I was going the other way, it would be bearing right, but it's bearing left. But there's something going on here. I noticed a little sign. I go, uh-oh, now I'm going to get lost. But once I get there, I realize the sign says private. So I see this all over the island where there's a public or a Greenway trail, or especially at Clayhead, the Clayhead trails. Abutting property owners, and you see it throughout this particular walk, have put in their own connecting little walk to join the trail system right from their own property. But they like it to be flowing one way. That would be from them to the trail, not from the trail to them for anyone other than themselves. So this is please respect the private signs, because that's going to just end you up in somebody's backyard. And along the way, you'll see many of these. I don't point out too many more, but now at this point, I've come down and I can see there's a wall, and I'm going to have to choose. This is the end of the little Harrison Loop. And so which way to go? I'm going to go to the right. If I went to the left, that's where I would meet up with the step stile that came in from the cemetery. So I'm just going to go off to the right and pick up where I was going originally anyway. Actually, I time traveled myself back to just coming off of the step stile. I forgot. And that's right over here off screen. And I've just stepped onto the path, and now I'm going to go down to meet where I just was. In the meanwhile, I'll notice I have lots of feathered friends on this trip with me. I saw a lot of birds over the many days that I did this. And there were a lot of mourning doves in this area, and that's because it's very close to the Ball O'Brien, to the West Side 20 housing collective. And there are a few bird feeders there. And where there are bird feeders, there are birds. So again, the human interaction along the landscape is beneficial in that I saw a lot of birds, especially these beautiful mourning doves. And lots of downy woodpeckers throughout the walk, working on, they like punky dead wood, so they were working on it pretty well. And we proceed along. And again, this is sort of the feel of the typical walk that we're going to have the rest of the way, is sort of a little bit hemmed in with vegetation and sort of a tangle on either side of us. But another holly, big giant holly, all sort of being overgrown and in through. I think a good program over time is going to be cleaning out these holly trees. One thing about holly, they're beautiful. They hold their leaves all winter, and they have, the female of the plant has berries, which are edible by many, many bird species. we stop and just past the holly, you can the opening in the view, and it can look back. We came down this road over here along the cemetery edge, and beautiful view back at the cemetery. And going on, stone wall is very old stone wall, very well. I don't know, it's taller than many that I see. I think it just hasn't had time to fall down, or the farmer hasn't had to take too many off of the top row to build something else. Now we're going up. It's quite, this walk has a lot of up and down. This is going up quite gravelly. Gotta watch your step. You get to the top, we've just come up this hill, you get to the top, and now we look back through this little opening at the cemetery. Now we're in the upper corner. That previous view was down about, about halfway between corners of the cemetery. But here we're at the top of the hill, and if coming out, and we're gonna cross a driveway. And if we were, this is Johanna Ross's, if anybody is familiar with that name. We're going to cross this driveway, which goes on to somebody else's house, across to the path that picks up right over here. So first you look left down this old driveway that goes to Johanna Ross's and the cemetery on the other side. And then here we're going to just proceed on our pathway. And lots of people and things, lots of beings are using these paths, as evidenced by the walker and the dog in front of me, and lots of deer print, whether in mud or snow. So, and I did see deer a couple of nights, but it always seems like I startle them before I see them. So then I startle them, they startle me, and I never get the photo, but I get their footprints. And not too long after you kind of wind this path, again, it's up and down and around and stony and a tangle of vegetation. And pretty soon you start to see another driveway coming up, and that's right down here. Of course, right here is another holly, beautiful little holly tree. And once I get down to this road, the path ends right here. It doesn't end, it just crosses over. But so now we have another driveway. This is actually the end of a very old driveway. We're going to meet up with this at later on. But this goes back towards what they used to call Little Beaver. Is where Jack Lefcourt lives, Fred Leader, this very old road with some old houses back there. But we're going to cross over. Once we're in the middle of the road, we'll look down. This is this connecting dirt road to Beacon Hill. We've just come out from here, and now we're going to cross over to this. This is driveway to the Tonner's house, but right along the driveway, what am I doing? Oh yeah, actually I stopped here to look back at the path we just came from, which is right up here. I realized, there we go. This is, we just came out of here, and here, this is pretty, it's very well signed. You cannot easily go astray on this. You'll always find yourself going along the right path because it's very well marked. So what we're doing is we're going to head down the Greenway trail, goes right along this stone wall. And this is the Tonner property. And actually one day when I was there, I saw Kurt out there, and we had quite a great discussion about the birds and the gulls he was feeding. And again, happy birdland. But again, well marked. This is the way to get to Beacon Hill and Old Mill Road beyond that. In case you didn't know where Old Mill Road meant, this one says trail. This one says trail. And you can't miss it. You just follow it down, trail, Old Mill Road, plenty of signage. But as you go along, you see I'll go back just a second. You have a sense of the industry of human nature. There's boats and gardens and building materials and projects. And I think just the way a person should be on Black Island, just involved in many, many, many things, from gardening to boating to building to bird feeders to chopping wood, whatever it takes. Whatever it takes, as Nick DiPetrillo used to say, to make a living on Black Island. And sometimes the boat just has to stay with you in the yard. But you keep going, and it's not very far beyond the boat that you find yourself wandering along the stone wall, and it's starting to feel very magical. I don't know, there's for some reason, this particular part of the walk feels very enchanted to me. Suddenly, I don't know, it's the light, the old stones, the fact that the stone walls haven't been messed with, you know, that they're somehow very organic. um, the trees are big, and it's you feel like you're going into Middle Earth. Here you have the corner of the stone wall, such a beautiful piece of architecture. And when you step down, you come down, it's just step down. It's like in all the good senses, like a waterfall step down. The steps are just right there. There's no like teetering and tottering. It's just natural footfalls over the stone wall. And if you look back, there is a sign that says, yes, of course, you are in Middle Earth. So we proceed on again up the old path and start noticing the things that are in the landscape, of which there are tons of lichen on these old rocks. It's very shaded, so it tends to be relatively moist in the, in everything but winter. So that's good conditions for fungi. It's good conditions for lichen. It's good conditions for mosses and ferns and things like that. So. But you start looking at these stone walls and you start thinking, oh my God, they are so beautiful. Just this one granite quartz rock. Well, look at it closely. And this is what you see. It looks like somebody's jagged teeth. The crystals of the quartz are just so evident. You've got rose quartz and smoky quartz and, some white quartz. And then a little bit of granite. And then next to it, you have this beautiful gray shield lichen. Oh, and then all of a sudden, they're not all gray shields. Some of them are these little black lichens, all of which have their own individual names. So after I find the fungi expert, I need to find a lichen expert, because lichens are quite amazing. This is interesting. A lot of, the lichens and the fungi, they have such a great ecological value. They're breaking down the dead wood and the particles in the landscape and breaking them down into smaller and smaller pieces. And they are the nutrients of the earth. So you'll see a dead piece of wood on the ground and it'll be just covered with these scales. It's like some imaginative scaly animal. And it looks green. I'm going, is that a fungi or a lichen? I think in this case, it is mostly a fungi with a lichen probably growing on it. It's clearly one of those, you'll see some more of these shelf-like lichens that grow on the, fungi that grows on the wood. But the green tinge is also growing some kind of either lichen or some kind of mold or something to give it that green tinge. But then up in the trees, you see this. This is a lichen. It's in a group known as Old Man Beard Lichens. This is actually, I'm showing it upside down. If I were looking at this up in the sky, it would be hanging down. Oops. Oh, there we go. It would be hanging down. But when I did that in the photo, it just looked wrong because it looks like it wants to be a tree or a shrub, going outward. So I put it in the photo like this, but that is a lichen. And then we have mosses along the trail. Two different kinds of mosses that I identified quickly. There was another one I forgot to take the picture of, a smooth one, but this one is known as big star moss. It also smooth cap moss. It's got many names, but you notice the leaves are quite different than the sphagnum moss that you're used to seeing, especially in wet areas. The big star moss is often at the bank of an old road, whereas the sphagnum moss is almost always where there's a source of fresh water. But mosses are there, lichens, fungi. It's beautiful. But of course, with all this wind and dead activity, we have sometimes we have things in the paths. And this is a big log. And I like them when they're this big because that means they're either uh, high enough that you can get under them easily if you're short, and sturdy enough to climb over them if you're taller. So it's not really too much of a hindrance. And when I got close to this beautiful fallen pain in the neck limb in the tree, I noticed, look at this branch. It's full with those shelf fungus. And as you look at them more closely, they get more and more beautiful and more textured and more intriguing. So quite, this is another of the polypore shelf or bracken fungi. But it's still a limb in the way. And so thankfully, we have a crew called Adrian's Army. And within the beginning of my work on this walk and the end, it had been opened up and the pieces had been put to the side to decompose. At least some of them are going to decompose on site. And the pathway is open up again. Thank you, Adrian's Army. As we go up the hill, we come up to one of the only really tall trees in the middle of the walk that I found. And it's this big eastern red cedar. Really amazing. And I couldn't resist putting this one in because when I got home and looked at it, I realized it had a picture of it had the moon in the photo. Again, it's the form of so many things that has me intrigued and enchanted. Just looking at a little branch of the eastern red cedar against the skies, it's just beautiful. Then you came across this little bit of a mess, and I'm like, what is that? I can't quite, it's got a funny form. It always looks scraggly. It looks like it's, how a plant will get leggy because it's trying to get into the air or into the sun. Well, that's what this looks like. And I looked at it more closely because I had a feeling, and it's got a very distinctive bark and shape, the way it's sort of bends. I don't think I was able to show that well in these photos, but it tends to grow and then have a sharp angle another way because it's trying to spread out to get to the sun. This is a beach plum. I'm pretty sure, 99% sure. This is the color is right, the bark is right, the form is right. And so in a couple of months, I'll go back and should be blooming with a beautiful long branches of beach plum blossoms. So I'll confirm that later in the spring. And if in fact it is a beach plum, which I feel very certain about, I'll mark it and see if we can't clean up around it a little bit and open it up, because that'll be a nice specimen to have along this walk. Of course, there's nothing, there's tons of this bramble, and some of it's just beautiful. The red, it's blackberry canes, and that's what's redding up right now. It gives the island island's gonna look very reddish soon because of the budding on the shad and other things, but also because of the blackberry canes, which look so red right now. And not to be outdone, things are looking very green, things that the common greenbrier always looks green. So it's not that it's early spring and turning green, it is always green, but it is in such masses along the edges of this walk that it starts to form its own sort of beauty and color palette. This is these are the berries of the common greenbrier, most of which have been eaten now, but there's still quite a few around for birds. This is a favorite food of robins and catbirds when they returned. There won't be much new berries, but there'll be these left over from last year to hold them over. So common greenbrier, blackberry canes. And then you have all these tangles of wood, and you go, well, how many trees are in there? Well, I don't know if I can tell you how many shrubs are in this picture. But as I look closer and closer, I can tell there's at least 3 different species. Most of the larger ones, parsing, is going from smaller to bigger. But you have the smooth bark of a shad, smooth gray bark of a shad, and the rough textured bark of a chokecherry. And then there's this other tangle in here, and it was like this vine. And then I pulled it out a little bit, and of course it's got green leaves on it at each little nodule, and that's the Japanese honeysuckle, sort of binding the whole thing together. Of course, that is a strangler, and here's evidence of what it can do. Like a new vine of honeysuckle can twine around a branch, and so impede its growth that it will look like a spiral because it's cut into it. Actually, the vine did not cut into the bark. The bark grew beyond the tight stranglehold of the honeysuckle. And in the background, there's a house. There are houses all through here, but you don't feel like it when you're walking here. You feel like you're in just a secluded little ramble of a walk. And starting to come out at the other end of this, see another house in the distance, just showing up here, but more holly, more American holly. And as we open up and come out that walk, we start to see where we are. This is the backside of John Willis's farm. I think maybe he calls it Beacon Hollow Farm, because it's in the hollow, not the hill. But we still have a ways to go. But you look across and it's very bucolic. Here's this barn with a couple of horses there. There's tree. I believe this is a giant maple. And once you start looking closely at the tree, you start to see the sapsucker holes. Excuse me. So sapsuckers is in the woodpecker family, and they make these wonderful little tiny holes for pounding into the trunk, and it will cause the sap to flow. Not so much this time of year, but it will cause the sap to flow, and then insects will be attracted to the sap, and then the sapsucker is really after the insects, but it takes the sapsucker, the sap and insects and all, but it will leave this incredible patterning. You can see lines, or sometimes they call it tattooing, on the bark. And whenever you see that, you know that this is a favorite tree of the yellow-bellied sapsucker. Excuse me. Now the path is going on. It's about to turn again. You have a hint of another property up here, and there's some clearing going on. I'm not sure if they're just what's happening, but the path is sort of which way to go. Well, we're going to go left. And continue on. We make the final turn towards Beacon Hill, and I really don't know if you can think of a more bucolic view on Block Island than that. We've come out of the ramble. We've been in another world and another time, and here's this beautiful farm, and this very old, beautiful mansard house. You look at any old picture of Block Island from the last century, as far back as they were making photos, if you're on Beacon Hill and it's the image is of Beacon Hill, you're going to see this square mansard building, which is currently owned by Bain Transu's family. But so great to see it in this view, along with our destination out here at Beacon Hill. Come along the side of the pathway comes this way right here. The farm, of course, there, more horses and ducks and tons of chickens. You know you're approaching this a long time before you see it, because you hear the roosters crowing. And when you get here, again, the signage is great. The spelling not so good, but the signage is great. This is definitely the Greenway path. Now you can, at this point, either continue on across the road, which is what we'll do in my next Zoom talk, or you can turn around and retrace your steps, or you can proceed down Beacon Hill Road towards town to the east and do a loop, which is we're just going to do that now. So we'll actually, this is a little deceiving. This is not the Beacon Hill Road coming off here. I sort of just think of these as two different things. one, we've come out, then we've gone down Beacon Hill, and we found this road about, I don't know, 1,000 feet down the road, maybe probably less. And there is a fire number sign here, which, if I recall, is like 1069 or 88 or something. It's a good landmark anyway, if you can remember the number. But this is the road. It's a very old road. So we're going to take this road. And as you go along the road, along the left, you'll quickly see this big, beautiful field of big trees. This is a very old road. This is, if I look at the old Stonewall map, Beacon Hill Road is on that map, and so is this road, but none of the other roads that are driveways off of Beacon Hill. Just this, the one we're traveling on now. And you can see it in the landscape. This is a beautiful set of stone walls, but this, because of the squareness and the sort of cutness of the stones and the right angle right here, this is surely part of a foundation, an old barn foundation, the way it's placed as well. And then the rest of the sort of the farm, the corral or whatever. So very interesting assortment and arrangement of stone walls right here. And we're walking down, this is the road, so you're not in anybody's driveway. The road's going to go down and curve around. So you just see this as you pass by. And again, you just have this sense of sort of human industry at work, and how the people survived on Block Island in the 1700s. So the road, as I mentioned, goes and curves around to the left. This lot here is the one that with all the trees, pretty vacant. I mean, it's not developed with a house, just a lot of trees, beautiful lot. The other side was the road, is the lot I was just talking about. The road curves around. And once you get around the corner, you have a choice to either go up to this house, which we're not going to do. We're going to continue down straight to this, straight down to this part right here, which you'll hear it. We're going a little closer, going down, and we'll find ourselves back at the place where the Tonner driveway goes in here, the right of way that we just traveled along the stone wall. Just in case you can't remember, trail, Old Mill Road, plenty of arrows. Or in my case, on this particular day, I then, instead of going straight down the road or going back on towards Beacon Hill, I retraced my step back towards the cemetery. And again, well signed, and just get back on the path, and off you go. It's really a very unique walk because of the sort of, I don't know, the feel of it, the ambience. It feels old. It feels like you're in another time. It feels like you're in another place. And it's completely, there's a lot of overstory. You don't have those great sweeping views. The views you find are sudden, like the cemetery or Doc Willis's farm, or they're just small little glimpses of a hollow here or a tree there, or a cedar sticking up. And it's sort of magical in a way that I can't really well define. But so lots of birds and lots of woodpecker activity. So I have been, most of these I've been trying to end with my little bird checklist from the travels when I put together the walk. And I often add some sightings around the island, which are, this time of year, these are all going to be birds. But again, it's about the form and the texture for me. This is looking at a red-breasted merganser. This is a female feeding among the rockweed right below the Trims Pond Bridge. And it was the form, the shape, the current, the movement of the water, the movement of the seaweed, and this duck just poking, getting its food in one of the very coldest days of the year when I took this photo. Just this week, see signs of spring on the corner down of Connecticut Avenue and Ocean Avenue, where it's kind of a wet yard. Ken and Marilyn Rose's yard, American robin, and there were 2 killdeer in there. Of course, I only got 1 in the image. And also this week, I was lucky enough to see a snowy owl. A little bit blurry because it was quite a far ways away, but I was lucky enough again. Because of the sun, I don't always know what I'm shooting until I get home, but you don't often get the owl eye open, and I don't know, fun to see it looking in a direction other than straight at you. So with that, I am concluding, and I thank you to Willie Fior, who's one of Adrian's army. And Adrian's army is a group of people who help clear the trails and take out the old trees and snip back the greenbrier that's grabbing at your clothing at all places. And they've just restarted after a 2-year COVID hiatus. So we are thankful to them and their work. And Willie is the chainsaw guy. So thank you, Willie, for clearing the path for us all. Okay, with that, I guess I will stop sharing and take any questions or comments. And
that's
okay.
great. I think Suzanne's got a question. You want to unmute? Oh, you're still muted.
Okay, got me?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So I don't understand where that last road was. You came out by Doc Lewis's, and then you were all of a sudden on another road. Doesn't it have a name or something?
I don't know if it has a name. I don't know what it is, but I would call it the road to Bill Penn's, or the road to Little Beaver, or the road to Jack Lefcourt's, or the road to Corton's, or let's see.
But if you're up on Beacon Hill, then it's past Doc Willis's going back towards town?
Yeah.
Yes, go back towards town.
It's on your right.
If you're going back towards town, it'll be on your left. If you're going from Doc Willis's towards town, it'll be on your left. And you'll go past where Gail Rose used to live, now owned by Stovers. Go past that and go past Flora Totten's, now owned by somebody else. And you come to this road. And it's the road I would have said you're going to Corton's originally. Do you know me now? Do you know it now?
No, but I'll figure it out.
You will. You'll figure it out. And I will say, if you're coming from town, from the Old Town Inn that way, then it'll be on your right. And the road on the inside corner is very steep, with lots of big maples in there. And when you're on the road, you're at the height of halfway up the tree. It's a great birding spot. Now you might know where I am.
I don't know where you are, but I will find it. I will find it when I return in May.
Okay.
Anna, you have your hand up? Go ahead.
I do. Where can one see the map of the stone walls that, Kim, you mentioned? And also, would you recommend buying and planting American holly, if I can find it?
I do buy American holly and plant it. If you can find it. Sometimes it's hard to get the native one, which is messier, because the nurseries want to sell you the slightly more domestic, that's straighter, right? But you can get the Native American holly. I will say the ones I've planted in my yard, I have to protect from the deer. But I don't see these having to be protected from the deer. So, and yes, I definitely think it's a great native plant for planting. And the Stonewall map, all of these, there's a Stonewall map in Town Hall. And I go with my little camera and take a picture of the section I'm working on. And I was in there the other day, and I found that I didn't use it in this presentation because there weren't enough recognizable field sites for me to relate to easily. But the women in the friends of mine in the finance department said, haven't you taken all the pictures you can of that by now? I go, well, probably, but
It's probably available online on the town website, would you say, Kim? Or
it's not.
it's not. Okay, so never mind. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Anna.
I look for it. Anytime I go into a used bookstore or an old plat, I look for it and I would pay any amount of money almost for it. Shouldn't say that, but
How old is
it was put together over many years in the late 1800s. The topography was at 18 something, 80 something. The wetlands was in these are all in the 1880s, but the topography was done different than the geography, done different than the roads, done different than the wetlands. So it's a compilation done by the federal government, and I call it the Stonewall map because it shows the stone walls and the roads, and it has little squares where existing buildings were, some of which you can still tell, some of which you can't, but it does give you a sense of where there were conglomerations. Like when you look at this, where near the old town, where the old town is now, used to be the old town. And when you look at that section in the Stonewall map, you see all this little aggregation of little building sites. So anyway, it's a fascinating thing. I think they love it when I come into the finance department and take pictures of the Stonewall map because they all learn something. I left them yesterday saying, well, you should look at Old Mill Road on this map. And then I went back after I was out a few minutes, and just so that they were looking, and I said, just so you know, it's not on there yet. It hadn't been built yet. And Joan Holy, if anybody knows who she is, she works with my family a lot. She goes, oh, I should have known.
Kim, I want you to notice the background picture.
I see North Light.
Yeah, it's yours. It's one.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, it's the one that you showed us during the last talk.
Oh, good. From the breed land.
Yeah, so I stole it from you.
Okay, well, enjoy it.
You too. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's great. Great. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, and I put it in the chat too.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see it.
Okay. Does the sapsucker damage the tree?
It seems like they would, all those holes. I think the truth is that the tree that's soft enough for them to get into is already on its last years. Although I see a lot of, there are especially maples and apples that I usually notice them on.
Yeah.
And they seem to be pretty resilient, but I'm sure over time they damage them. They must, that many holes, breaking the intersecting with the phloem and xylem of the nutrients up and down the tree. But I think it would take a lot. I think other things damage them more, but I'm sure they do eventually.
I have a very, very, very old and really interesting apple tree kind of conglomeration where the limbs have actually gone into the ground and sprouted again. And it has lots of those little holes.
Yeah, one of my bird banding lanes up at Lapham's was called the Apple Tree Lane because it was several big old apple trees in there. Same thing, limbs have fallen off, the limb is leaned over and has rooted, and now there's a new part of the tree growing, and they're full. The Lapham's renamed it from the Apple Tree Lane to Sapsucker Hollow because there's so many of them. But they seem to be, I mean, I've been helping for 40 years, and 2 of the 3 giant apples in that lane are still growing.
Yeah.
So they don't look as robust, but they're, like you said, the limb is growing out of the ground now, and
mine has lots and lots of apples, so
there you go.
it looks pretty healthy.
Yeah.
But there are lots of those little dots.
Yeah.
When I lived in Ohio, I had a magnolia tree that was just a sapsucker draw.
Yeah.
And it was clearly a flourishing tree.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. That's great.
Great. Anything else? Any other questions or? And so Kim, we're taking a little, we have I should have checked the date. The next one is, I think about
It's March 23rd. It's
March
exactly
23rd.
1 month from today, and we'll be picking up the trail from Beacon Hill to Old Mill Road.
Excellent.
And getting the next section.
I had one quick question.
Yeah.
Kim, about how long was that walk that you just did from the start?
In miles or time?
Miles.
It's not as long as it seemed like.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was wondering. Yeah.
It's about the equivalent of, maybe a little more than going from Ball O'Brien to the airport.
Okay.
It's a
Okay.
little windy, but it's actually, if I wasn't stopping to take photos and look at sapsucker holes, I'd be able to do it in probably 20 minutes.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And I do find that, that's a part of the island I haven't spent much time on. And now I'm like, as I said to somebody yesterday, because yesterday I was there, I go, oh, I need one more picture of the entry or something. I don't know what I was doing. Needed something else for this presentation. And I saw a hermit thrush and a golden crown kinglet. And I go, oh my God, this is my new favorite walk. It's a place I haven't gone much. But so I tend to, nobody wants to go for a walk with me because I'm stopping and going and, considering whatever, exactly what fungi is this, that kind of thing. So, but it's not that long. I think you'd love
Yeah.
it. I think
Yeah.
Zoe would love it.
Oh, well, actually, I did. I can't remember when it was. Not all that long ago. I did that walk, that little downhill down to the pond behind the restrooms, and I'll tell you, I fell going
Yeah.
down. It was not an injured fall, but my feet went right out from underneath me.
Yeah, well, I think either rolling sand because it's loose gravel.
Yeah, very.
And the
loose.
other day, it was frozen. When that thought today, I'll be skiing down there. It's terrible.
Yeah, right.
But you know what I found there, which I didn't know, is right where that little sign says rough terrain. Right. If you don't go down to the beach there, if you take the path, it's a loop path that takes you around and brings you out a little bit closer to Legion Park, and it's a perfect little short path. Now you can't do it right now because a tree has fallen down, and and it's got a lot of greenbrier on it, and I usually kind of plow through it, but I couldn't plow through it. I was going to talk to you about that, Charlotte, but I don't think that's our area, right?
No, that trail, this is the one that kind of circles around Ball O'Brien Park.
Yeah.
That was actually done by, I'm not saying that it's not our thing to maintain, but it's the Lions Club,
right?
That trail,
Right.
sort of in honor of Adrian Mitchell, and the Leos, which are the youth members of the Lions Club, are supposedly maintaining it.
Well, I'm sure as soon as spring comes, they'll
do a
there.
cleanup
They've
day
got a
there.
Good job. And I didn't know that was there, and I found it completely enchanting. Again, a couple of little white-throated sparrows just perched there talking at me, and I'm like, oh, I can't wait to do a little walk there in the summertime. So, but that would be nice. Go along there, come out by the cemetery, go into the cemetery, and then come out by either Beacon Hill. Actually, if you didn't want to do that last bit, you could come out by the road that I don't know the name of. I'm not sure it has a name of. And instead of going by Tonners, just follow the road out to Beacon Hill,
Right.
and then go up the Airport Hill strip gut.
Yeah.
Kim, those were classic Block Island directions, I have to say. Like the owner 3 owners ago house. I don't know the current owners, but it used to. That was classic Block Island.
I know this group, right? This group has many different eras came to Block Island, they might know.
The current
gonna
owners, like, are
know.
the Dempseys of that house. But anyway,
Oh, really? Which one is that?
the one,
Florida?
like, is that that one right on the road, very close onto the road, like with the bank? It's a tiny little sweet little house.
Yeah,
Is
Florida.
it actually? It's actually an heir of the-
Flores?
yeah, like a cousin or nephew or something. Actually,
that's
the
great.
Dempseys. Very
Okay,
nice.
good. I know that now. I always call it Flora Totten's house.
Okay.
It was great. Thank you.
Thank
All right.
you.
Well, thanks
You're
for
welcome.
coming, and thanks, Kim. That was great.
Thanks,
Sorry
everybody.
for the technical problems in the beginning.
I know. And
We'll
my
edit that.
voice,
We'll edit that out.
my voice started to give out there. Too much
Okay.
talking.
Okay. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
So much.
Bye.
Thank you, Kim and Charlotte.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye, Annie.
Bye. And thanks for your.
Charlotte, I'm going to give you a call in a second.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.